With the first pick in the 2025 NFL Draft,
it took the Packers 5 tries just to get it.
The NFL selects Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And now they're about to host the biggest event of the NFL offseason.
It'll be the largest event ever held in Green Bay.
This week on Green Bay on Draft, a closer look at how a once insignificant NFL draft finally found its way to Titletown. Welcome into what we'll call the podcast studio here at Fox 6 in Milwaukee. I'm Sam Kraemer, joined today by Fox 6 anchor Ted Perry.
Happy to be here.
And this is the first episode, the premiere episode of what we are calling Green Bay on Draft. Ted came up with the name. That's actually why he's here. No other reason. This is a limited podcast in which we're going to explore the stories around the 2025 NFL Draft, which, if you haven't heard, is going to be hosted up in Green Bay, in and around Lambeau Field. Huge event for the Green Bay area. It is likely going to be the biggest event Green Bay will ever host. At least that's what the Packers are calling it. There are so many stories that are going to be part of this experience, so much more than the players that will hear their names called, the teams that are filling the holes within their roster, that we thought this is a good space to kind of let those stories breathe. There's only so much we can do within the confines of a newscast, and that is why we're excited to bring you Green Bay on Draft. So I feel like with that, we need to explain briefly what the NFL Draft is. Ted, you're working on a story about the history of it. How would you explain it to people that sports fans maybe don't understand or comprehend what goes into this?
Well, I think almost the more interesting thing is that there was a time in the NFL when there was not a draft.
Yeah.
That teams just went out and paid whatever players they could get coming out of college as long as they were eligible, and sometimes even when they weren't eligible. But it's a chance to make bad teams better quickly. And it started in 1936. Brad Bell, Burt Bell,
yes.
Bell, the then commissioner, said, look, this wasn't fair. He leaned sort of heavily toward toward Philadelphia, and said, we need to make this more fair. So they came up with a system which is really very identical to the system they're using now. If you're the worst team, you get the first pick, second worst team, second pick, and so on and so on. A couple of years they did it where they would draft, everyone would get their turn, and then the top 5 teams had to sit out, and the bottom 5 teams would only draft in the second round. So they've varied the format, but the idea has remained the same basically since 1936. If you're bad, we want you to get better quickly.
The idea of competitive balance, of parity. And if you think about it, this process of a draft, in no other profession outside of sports professions do employers have this opportunity to pick from a pool of potential employees. And so in its essence, it's really innocent. But what has happened over the last several years is just this explosion into this story. But you talked with the Pro Football Hall of Fame about kind of how this came to be. You talked about the Eagles, but what has perhaps catapulted the NFL Draft into an event, not just this mechanism of the offseason?
I'll answer that with a story. When I was 18 years old, my birthday falls right around the draft. My birthday's April 29th. Sometimes it's the draft day. My mom said, what do you want? I said, I want to stay home from school and I want to watch the draft because it's now televised on ESPN. Didn't cost her a penny. She said, fine. When I talked to Rich DeRozier of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, those are the magic letters, ESPN. When this thing got televised, it started out as a daytime television thing. Now it's moved to prime time, right? People just got more into it. They could sit at their office. They could sit at home. They could take the day off like I did. And just to see how the sausage was being made, I think really catapulted this into the event it's become. When they gathered in 1936 in the Ritz-Carlton in Philadelphia, the players weren't there. The owners were there. A few members of the press were there, and they were only there because the championship game was being played the next day. That's how they decided where the draft was going to be for a long time. What was the site of the NFL championship game? Why we're all there, let's do the draft.
And it's a good segue because there's always a Wisconsin connection, and perhaps within it, there's always a Milwaukee connection. And before Green Bay is going to host it later this month, Milwaukee did. And a long, long time ago, it's December 1939. How did that come to be? And if you can imagine, the NFL championship is played at State Fair Park.
which is really a whole separate issue.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that because that's fascinating, because I think there are people still alive in Green Bay who are a little bitter that Curly Lambeau agreed with the league officials to say, yeah, we could sell 5,000 more seats if we had it out at State Fair Park. Yeah, we'll do that. So Green Bay fans were really ticked off about that at the time. But it was here in Milwaukee at the Schrader Hotel, which is now the Milwaukee Hilton Center downtown. A beautiful hotel, by the way, if you've not been in. And the Empire Room, which I imagine looks very much today like it did that day, December 9th, 1939. It was technically the 1940 draft. We do it in the spring now, so the 25 draft is in the spring. But they did it then, 1939, December 9th. 10 teams came to town, including the Packers and the Cleveland Rams and the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Brooklyn Dodgers. These were some of the teams at the time. Cardinals were there, but they weren't in St. Louis at the time. They were still in Chicago at the time. They had the number 1 pick that year. So they all converged on the Schrader Hotel. And the newspaper articles at the time are fascinating because they talk about the Packers really impressing the out-of-town visitors with the spread they put on. They fed them tenderloin and let the press come in. The press was in the room next door enjoying refreshments, according to an article in the Sentinel at the time. They don't elaborate on what refreshments were, but the way it was worded, they were boozing it up.
Yeah, it's that you can almost hear the drawl, the delivery of the 1930s, 1940s sports writers, and it's just this kind of kitschy thing. But again, Milwaukee did it, and then I forget the exact year when the NFL finds a permanent home for the draft in New York City. It's at Radio City Music Hall. Do you have it?
1965 to 2014,
Yeah.
New York became, and not necessarily Radio City, but different hotels, and then Radio City had come to know it. So really, that was the anomaly because it had moved around. From 36 to 49, it was the site of the championship game. From 50 to about 1965, it did move to other cities with no certain criteria involved in hosting it, aside from can you host this many people and can you throw a good party for the owners. And again, this is not a public-related thing really until the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and that's when ESPN picks it up. So how does this even come to Green Bay? How do we even get here? It has to do, again, with 2014 Radio City Music Hall, an announcement that kind of came as a surprise, I think, to a lot of people that follow the NFL, and that was Commissioner Roger Goodell saying that the NFL is looking at moving the draft out of New York. And again, perhaps for the modern day fan, you're thinking, well, this is a mainstay. How could they do this?
Right. I got a few years on you, and I always associate it with New York. And you grew up with it being in New York. So
in the
that's
ESPN
what we think
era.
of, in the
exactly.
in the ESPN era, for
where,
sure.
where it's all televised.
Yeah.
And I just love that it's an Easter event at Radio City Music Hall that forces the NFL off the calendar and into this problem, I guess we'll call it, of, okay, well, now where do we go?
Yeah.
And they start in
we
Chicago.
like to think Super Bowl Sunday is the ultimate Sunday. Easter Sunday is going to
exactly
play the trump card on that one.
Yeah, we know that for sure. It starts in Chicago, and they've just been kind of ping-ponging around. They did it virtually in 2020 when they had to.
I call that the Roger Goodell Man Cave draft.
That's a good one.
And we were wondering how that was going to look. Remember the years of COVID and the pandemic and social isolation? I got to give the NFL a standing ovation. He sat in a lazy boy in his basement in Connecticut, and he ran that thing beautifully. I got to give the commissioner credit on that. That draft is always going to be, I think, the most memorable one for me because of the circumstances and how they were able to pull it off.
Someone else who said it's the most memorable is Mark Murphy. And I'll get to that explanation in a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a perfect segue to talk to him. We had the opportunity to sit down with him for a good half hour or so at Lambeau Field. If you don't know, he is the president and chief executive officer of the Green Bay Packers. He is the only de facto owner that's actually not an owner because of the ownership structure of the Packers being owned by the community. He will retire because of a rule within the Packers structure that says if you are 70 years old, it's time for you to go. 18-year tenure, which is exactly what Mr. Harlan had before him, and there's so many similarities. But this is kind of a swan song for him. This is how the NFL, they wanted to thank him, I think, for his service in hearing from the organizing committee that Green Bay stood up to try and get this. And that kind of is how we get here how the NFL draft comes here. And I asked him, if we go back, he's elected, the board elects him the next president, CEO of the Packers on December 3rd, 2007. If you can take your mind back to that time. 3 months later, Brett Favre retires. A couple months later after that, Brett Favre unretires. He's dealing with this saga, with this kind of young guy coming up. His name's Aaron Rodgers. Perhaps you've heard of him. And just now, those issues seem so small. But I asked him about starting and if he could even imagine where he's at today.
December 3rd, 2007, you're elected the next president and chief executive officer.
Boy, you're going back a long way.
Could that version of Mark Murphy fathom today's version of Mark Murphy and everything that's happened in what will be 18 years?
That's a great question. Probably not. And especially talking about getting ready to host the draft. That was back in 2007. The draft was in New York City, and it wasn't a big deal. And obviously, in 2015, when they decided to take it on the road and they started with Chicago, really completely changed the nature of the draft.
So it was 2015, and doing some research, a scheduling conflict at Radio City Music Hall. I believe it's like an Easter event.
Yeah.
That had the priority, and that's what
that tells you that.
And that is the first domino that falls and ends up to where we are today. How soon was it you or who comes up with the idea? Hey, let's bid for this, and how soon did that happen?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but it was probably maybe 2016 and 17 when, when they started taking it on the road, and it was in Chicago for 2 years. I think we decided as an organization that, hey, Green Bay would be a great place for the draft. We'll never get the Super Bowl, but this would be fantastic for not just the Packers organization, but the entire state and the whole community. So we kind of raised our hand and said, what about us? Take a look at us. And, I think with our history and tradition and what that means to not only our organization and the state here, but, what the history and tradition of the Packers means to the league. And I think the league was, and then of course Lambeau Field. It's iconic, and it's, I think, on a lot of NFL fans' bucket list is to see Lambeau Field. So kind of tied those together.
One of the things he said later in the interview, the biggest asset the Packers have, it's not the QB, it's not the history perhaps, it's Lambeau Field.
Sure.
And I think it makes sense that it's so integral to their bid for the NFL to say, you know what? Yeah, let's actually go to Green Bay.
I think, and you asked Murphy about this, or he even volunteered it, they're never getting a Super Bowl. I'm not so sure they won't. The Super Bowl is going to go on for a very long time. Somewhere along the line, they're going to say, why don't we do it in February in Green Bay? Real football on grass. Let's put that in the wish list.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's a draw. Detroit had the benefit of having Ford Field, which is covered. You can go in if you needed to. We don't have that. So what are they going to do in case of really lousy April weather?
Well, we did talk about that as well. And I asked if the NFL secretly or publicly is hoping for maybe a little bit of snow. And he said, yeah. Just the right amount of snow. It's like Goldilocks, okay? Not a full-on snowstorm, not just maybe a light dusting, a little bit more so that you can see it. I mean, think about all the people that watch Sunday and Monday football games when the snow is falling. You're like, wow, the glory days. It's the gridiron,
right.
the ice bowl, so to speak. They would love that. But we know April in Wisconsin can be crazy. Yep. Last week we were up there. There was snow on the ground. We went up there earlier this month. In March, we went up there, and it wasn't as good in terms of snow. It was completely barren. So they can get anything.
Yep.
And so that's why part of the bid, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, part of the bid is the space that you have. And he was very adamant that the expansion of the Resch Expo, if you've ever been up there, the Resch Center is right there. It's an indoor arena. They added on to the Resch Expo. That was critical in gaining the NFL's approval. And so it's there in a combination of those facilities that if there is inclement weather, they'll have a backup plan.
That is their Baird Center, which allowed us to get the RNC, to put it in
Exactly.
those type of terms.
Yep. You need the apparatus. And to get back to the Super Bowl, he talks about the hotel room requirement. It's 40,000. And the Green Bay, Appleton area is about between 8,000 and 9,000.
Bring them down here. I mean, you can do it. You can put them in Madison. You can put them in Milwaukee.
I worry about the executives that want to play golf because
Yeah.
that's such a big part of the package. Certainly, there have been Februaries where they can do that.
I know. I'm probably the only person who believes it can happen and
Yeah.
will happen. But sticking to this, though, I mean, it's interesting that when you asked him the question, who actually sparked it, it was so long ago in this process that he can't say, oh, it was, X guy or X woman
Yeah.
came up with that. It's just sort of, hey, maybe we could, right? Let's raise our hand.
Right. It's kind of this, they didn't brand it this way. I'm going to brand it this way. It's a consolation to not being what the NFL views right now as a Super Bowl host quality city. It's an opportunity to still get the attention, just not the biggest game attention. But if you think about it from an event standpoint, the organizing committee, which consists of some members from the Packers, Discover Green Bay, that's the tourism agency up there, and a number of other local corporate partners, they expect the numbers they've thrown out are between 240,000 and 300,000 people coming to Green Bay. That's more than a Super Bowl can fit.
Right.
The event is over 3 days. This year, it's April 24th through the 26th. Super Bowl Sunday is one day with a week of kind of a pre-party. It is a bigger event.
In which most of the fans come in on that Friday.
Exactly.
Right.
It is a bigger event in terms of hosting event.
Right.
Not in terms of magnitude, but in terms of hosting an event and perhaps the community impact than the Super Bowl, which is interesting to think about.
So if they pull this off, it sort of belies the logic that you can't host a Super Bowl.
Right.
And then it just goes down to whether the executives want to play golf or go curling.
Exactly.
So what I love is that whoever is the number one pick this year, and I don't know who it's going to be. Who even has the first pick this year?
The first pick, I should have that.
We should know that, but we'll come up with
It's the
that.
Tennessee Titans.
Tennessee Titans, according to Anthony, our producer. So they're going to pick someone, and that young man's going to be instantly rich.
Yep.
Okay? We love talking about this, you and I.
Yes.
The first selection of the first draft, 1936, let's go back to Philadelphia, the Ritz-Carlton, the Chicago Cardinals, drafting a young man out of the University of Chicago, Jay Berwanger. Jay Berwanger was the Heisman Trophy winner and the number one pick. University of Chicago, which back then was a Big Ten team.
Yep.
You're a Big Ten guy. I'm a Big Ten guy. University of Chicago was a Big Ten team back then. He said, no, thanks. It's not lucrative enough. It's not lucrative enough for me. Can't make a go of it. He went on, joined the Navy, became a flight instructor, came back to suburban Chicago, and started a very successful rubber manufacturing plant. So Jay Berwanger did okay on his own. But let's compare that to last year's number one pick, Caleb Williams, also a Heisman Trophy winner, not the reigning Heisman Trophy winner at that point, but a Heisman Trophy winner. He signed 4 years, $39.5 million. He is set for life, and good for him.
Yeah.
No, I don't begrudge that at all. But to think that there was a time when the number one draft pick, a Heisman Trophy winner, said to the NFL, you're not paying me enough to do this. And in fact, of the 81 guys drafted, 52 in that first draft said, we're going to do something else. So that is the fascinating part to me.
It speaks to the evolution of this game
Absolutely.
in a number of ways. First, the business, the place in the culture, and just the fact that it has, fair to say, it's replaced baseball as America's pastime in a way.
Long ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's more than fair to say it.
What is appointment TV viewing these days? It's hard. Sundays are pretty appointment viewing, and now it's Thursday, and now it's Saturday in the postseason, and Monday, of course, and it's just every day of the week. They own every day of the week.
And the fascinating thing about that is George Halas, in his autobiography, talks about television and the television station in Chicago that came to him and said, we want to put your games on the air. And he was thinking to himself, I can't afford to buy TV time to put this on the air. And he just kept his mouth shut. And when they said, it then dawned on him that they were going to pay him to televise his Chicago Bears. And if George Halas had not kept his mouth shut, we might not be talking this kind of money. But it was that when Alice finally realized, oh, holy cow, they want to pay me.
Yeah.
They're not coming to me asking to buy airtime. They're going to give me the airtime and sell commercials for it.
Talked
So,
about the dominoes earlier. Can you imagine what would have changed if that conversation
Right.
went differently?
yeah.
I can't imagine. Mark Murphy, for those that don't know, actually played in the NFL, and he
And very well.
and very well. He was a Pro Bowler. He played for Washington, then the Redskins, are the Commanders now. He has a very interesting draft story that he told me, and I'm going to recall it here. 1977. It was a 12-round draft at the time. It happened over 2 days. He was coming out of Colgate University. That's right. There is a school named Colgate. It's not just the toothpaste brand.
It's a very good school.
It is a great school, but maybe people around here aren't aware because it's not Big Ten or Big East or what have you. He gets a call from one George Allen, Hall of Fame coach, who was coach of Washington at the time, on the first day, and he says, "Hey, Mark, you know what? We like what you did in college. We're gonna plan to draft you on day 2, so we're gonna have you fly down." We'll have a press conference. We're going to take you, and it's just going to be a great thing.
We want you to be here when the commissioner calls your name.
Exactly, and kind of start that onboarding process, if you will.
Well, that sounds great.
It does sound great. It's not how it goes. And so he says he's so excited he can't sleep the night before. He gets to the airport early, flies into Dulles there in the D.C. area, and they send a driver. And they pick him up, and he's headed into town. Okay, great. We're going to do a little bit of a site tour. There's a lot to see in D.C.
Yeah.
Monuments, the U.S. Capitol, goes for lunch. And, I'm not sure if he's looking at his watch or just kind of playing the clock in his ear, but he's understanding, this is kind of going on a little bit. I'm not sure if we're going to get to...
And keep in mind, the draft is daytime.
Exactly.
During this time.
Yeah, and there are no cell phones, goes without saying. His driver, he says, keeps stopping at payphones to make calls, and he has no idea what's going on. He's the guest here. He's basically in town for a job interview, if you will. Eventually,
No, he's in town to take the job.
well, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Not an interview. He's already past that part. Eventually, in the afternoon, they make their way over to Washington's facility, and he is taken into head coach Allen's office. And the coach says, "Yep. So there's a contract in front of you, and it's $21,000 for year 1, $25,000 for year 2, with a $2,500 signing bonus. We didn't take you, but we think it's a good deal. I think you should just sign it, but just look it over." And Mark says, the coach then turns to his secretary and says, "And if he doesn't sign that, get the safety from Oklahoma on the phone. We'll use him as his backup." They basically held him hostage,
Right.
in a way of saying it, all day, so that other teams couldn't
find him.
contact him.
Because other teams knew that he wasn't drafted, that he was available, that he was a free agent. It's a brilliant move, ethically dicey
Ethically
move by the
concerning.
Washington team.
Yes,
But it worked out pretty well for him. I believe he won a Super Bowl with them
he did.
and has a Super Bowl ring and was really a respected player and then was active in the players' union as
Yeah.
well. So this guy has seen the game from every facet, from the huddle to the labor movement to ownership, if you will,
Yep.
as much as he can be called an owner.
And-
So he never heard his name called.
Never heard his name called. And to wrap a bow on that story, he says he got a call from his then girlfriend, who's now his wife, and says, "Hey, all these NFL teams are calling the house. Where the heck are you?" And basically says, "I've been held ransom."
I'm touring the Flight and Air Museum right now against my better judgment.
You'd never believe the Smithsonian. All the other NFL teams wanted him to put on weight and move to linebacker, and he didn't want to do that. Washington said, "We'll take you as you are, as a safety." That turned out well. As you mentioned, won a Super Bowl. He actually led the NFL in interceptions in
Did he?
1983. Not bad. Not bad for a guy who just wasn't sure if he was going to hear his name called or not. And it's just so funny. I asked him, you think that could happen today? He's like, no, definitely not. And that process has perhaps retired.
I wonder if every time he picked off a quarterback who was drafted, and all the quarterbacks who threw against him were probably drafted, if he just said, "Not bad for a free agent," if he just quietly said to himself. He's
How's
a
that for
very
being
jovial
undrafted?
guy, is he not? He's a wonderful guy to talk to.
Yes. And if you think about it, this role is perhaps as complicated as they come in the NFL because of the two dynamics he has to manage. On the one hand, Green Bay is by far the smallest city, smallest area that effectively hosts an NFL franchise, right? So you have to modify your business to fit that community. On the other hand, there may not be a business in the U.S. That has more attention and more money around it than the NFL
Right.
in the attention. You can't play that small town community role there. And I think what speaks to his ability to go both ways is that he has been so effective in growing the franchise in his time. Lambeau Field additions, I think it's like 8,000 seats. He's spent $600 million, not a cent of which is public money because of the ownership structure and the stock sales that have happened. Redesigning the atrium, he's done so many things there. At the same time, the commissioner, Roger Goodell, sees him as a valuable asset, that he's brought him in on executive committees to help guide the league in a way that brings the Packers, the smallest technically franchise, but with a huge following, to have a voice at the table.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot about who he is as a businessman and kind of seeing the whole picture.
I've never understood the forced retirement in anything, to be honest with you. But the Packers do have it. And you mentioned the similarities between him and Bob Harlan.
Yeah.
Two gentlemen, two very wise guys, both got Super Bowl wins out of their franchises. Both had quarterback issues they had to deal with. I mean, the parallels are so awesome. Does he plan to continue this role that the league has provided for him? He's far too energetic. 70 is not our father's 70 anymore, right? Or your father's not even close to 70, right?
He's getting there, but not yet.
But will he continue a role in some way, either with the organization or with the NFL?
With the organization, yes. The way the Packers set it up, the president, who is outgoing, is then basically pivoted to president emeritus, if you will.
Yeah.
So still involved there. I can't imagine Commissioner Goodell says, you're 70, hit the road, Jack.
Right.
I imagine he will still at least have the ear of Commissioner Goodell. I know he owns a golf course in the Green Bay area. I imagine he'll spend more time there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's always kind of been around in athletics. The last 18 years with the Packers, he was the athletics director at Northwestern University before that. And so I can't imagine him just saying, that's it, that's all. He's so invested that it would be wrong for him not to.
And that's a good-looking 70.
Yeah.
That's a fit 70.
Yeah.
Yeah, he takes care of himself, clearly.
Absolutely. I want to get back to bringing the draft to Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It took five tries, 5 bids.
Okay.
And so I asked him about that and that process of trying and trying again, and I thought his answer was really enlightening. Take a listen.
Was there ever any hesitancy on the point of the Packers? Like, can we pull this off? Do we think Green Bay can handle this?
No, never. It was always, this is going to be tremendous for the entire community, the whole state, and it's something we need to do. And we're a community-owned team, so for us, really, one of our core values is giving back to the community. I mean, the Packers would not be in Green Bay were it not for the support of the community over our long tenure here.
I heard in December from the organizing committee that it was the 5th bid.
Yeah.
A lot of people give up after maybe 3. What was it about the 5th bid that the NFL finally decides, you know what? Yeah, we're going to come to Green Bay.
Well, I mean, there's only so many so many cities that were willing to host it. But no, seriously, I think, the league had told us, given us some signs, I think, along the way that, we like the idea of having the draft in Green Bay. So, but it was obviously very exciting when Roger called and said, I think I've seen that's Green Bay's officially on the clock now when he made the announcement. So that was pretty exciting.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Absolutely.
What was it about the first 4 bids that did not meet the satisfaction of the NFL?
Well, if you think about it, so again, that's the 2014-2015 time frame.
Mm-hmm.
That's just about the time the concept of Titletown is about to come online.
There you go.
And I asked him about that as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But 2007, when he takes over, that is a 45-acre parcel of land that looks nothing like it does today. It truly is the neighborhood stadium, and I think that will always be. But they give them a lot of credit that they saw potential in something that I think maybe a lot of people weren't sure of at the time. And what we see today is truly a marvel in what they were able to do.
So it's the evolution of Titletown and that area and the restaurants and the bars that have sprung up around there that has the NFL saying, all right, you can host this party.
Yep.
Second of all, he says something there that was curious to me. Not everybody wants to host this. I can't believe that to be the case. I'm trying to think of a single. You don't think Phoenix would love to draw, even more people?
Sure.
The spring breakers have gone home. The spring ball guys have gone home. They would love it. I would think Texas would love it. Dallas has had it.
Yep.
Chicago's had it. Philly's had it. Who else has had it?
Vegas.
Vegas had it. Nashville has had it. I can't think of a city that wouldn't want this, that wouldn't want to say, yeah, that'd be great to have 200,000 to 300,000 people come to town for a weekend.
Well, first off, not to be negative, Nancy, it is a lot of work. And talking with the people at the Packers that are involved in this, they're like, what would we be doing at this time if we weren't hosting this mega event? And then I also think about there are some cities in which, the magnitude that what you think is a big event maybe isn't as big of an event in that city. For instance, LA, if you go back to Super Bowls there, you're in certain parts of the city, you actually wouldn't even know that the Super Bowl is being played.
That's because of the geographical size of those cities.
Exactly.
You still can't tell me that 200,000 to 300,000. Who's not going to go to LA?
I know.
Who doesn't want to go to Southern California in the springtime? I can't imagine. It's such a significant number. I can't believe anyone would turn their nose at it. I see the point you're making about sometimes you can be in a city and not know.
Yeah.
Right? But I can't believe there's a single franchise that wouldn't want to do the work. Yeah, it's hard work. So is having an NFL franchise in your city hard work.
I agree. And the benefits outweigh the cons here specifically. But I think we have to talk about Titletown in that what has happened there, and we talk about evolution, I think that's going to be his legacy. If you look at evolution from the roster, from going from from Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love, evolution of Lambeau Field, adding the seats as we talked about, maintaining the field but adding to it, and then building what has become a gem and something that you have to see in Titletown. Titletown was a nickname. Mm-hmm. Now it's actually a place, and we talked about that. And I thought I learned something there, and that the Packers did a lot of research about that. And I thought his answer on this was also interesting to hear.
In your opinion, just looking around and driving around today, obviously a lot has changed, just in your tenure even.
Sure. No.
Does the draft come to Titletown without the Titletown district?
I don't think so. No. I think Titletown was a key aspect. And it's not just what the Packers have done. I think the Resch Expo, that's a major addition to our community. I think some of the changes that we've made to Lambeau Field too have kind of modernized it, but not taken away from what's so special about Lambeau Field. But yeah, there's no question Titletown was really integral, and that's. If you look at the plans for the draft, Titletown's right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's the center of it. Almost in a way, away from the stage, the
yes.
experience part of it. How did Titletown come to be? And was that something that when you started, you came in with this idea that it could happen, or how did
I wish I could say I was that smart. The thought process there was. Pretty early on in my tenure, we knew that land around the stadium was valuable, and we'd seen in other professional sports, but probably the most relevant to us, we'd kind of seen what the Patriots had done, around their stadium in Foxborough. We call it Patriot Place, and we really liked that concept of development around the stadium, and made a couple visits out to see what they'd done. Really, and took a lot away from that. Did a lot of good things, but theirs was ours. We wanted ours to be more community focused. For instance, no private developer would put a full football field right in the middle of your development. The return on the football field is very minimal. It turns out.
Sure.
Minimal return on that football field, right. Not on the Packers one. It's so fascinating that I believe it's a Shopko grocery store. There are some homes there, a couple parking lots. Yeah, they lost parking in this area. Mm-hmm. And you look at it today and you think, how could Lambeau have existed without Titletown?
What took so long?
Yeah.
In other words, right. Again, the game has changed. The attention has gone from just X's and O's and being a good fan and being a good steward of the team. And the people of Wisconsin, not just Green Bay, the people of Wisconsin, people of Milwaukee. Remember, without Milwaukee, that Green Bay franchise might have gone under, which is why up until the early 90s, they played half their games at County Stadium.
Yep.
Milwaukee bailed them out. That's why they get 2 games every year for season ticket holders. There's Green Bay season ticket holders and there's Milwaukee. So you do wonder what took so long, but that's the growth of the game.
Yeah.
So is Titletown keeping up with the growth of the game or leading the growth of the game? They kind of go hand in hand.
They do go hand
right,
in hand.
exactly.
And it just speaks to the evolution that we keep talking about. It, for whatever reason, for popularity, for drama, he called it reality. And I said, yeah, it is reality TV, actually, in a way. The game, the draft, everything, that it's just so captivating, especially as entertainment.
And they're smart enough to just not leave Lambeau alone. They've made the developments. They've done the seats. They've added the atrium. But it's going to be Lambeau Field. It's not going to be Coles Field or Harley-Davidson Field or whatever. It's going to be Lambeau Field, and it's going to be grass, and it's going to be out in the open. If the Bears do move to Arlington Heights in their dome stadium, every team in that division, the Lions, the Vikings, the Bears, will play on artificial turf under a roof. The Packers will remain the sole. They're going to really be the monsters of the Midway. That Chicago doesn't earn that title anymore.
Truly.
I love that his sweatshirt said draft. The name of your show here, Green Bay on Draft, John Draft, very clever.
Yep.
It's not the term they originally used. Did you know that?
I did not know this.
In 1936, the newspaper article that I read said the league publicist was urging reporters to use this term, right of preferred negation.
Really rolls off the tongue.
It rolls off the tongue, and it doesn't even make sense. Negation is the lessening and the contracting of something.
Yeah.
So right of preferred negation didn't last long, but that's what they originally were urging the media to call it.
I just keep thinking about our promos guys having to voice that and how that would go. not well at all. It just the process from what it started as and what it ended as is just so fascinating. One more thing on Titletown that I want to include in here. He talked about negotiating with property owners. And one point that they made is, the winters here, they can be really long. Like, what can you do? That sentiment is why there's the Aaron's Tubing Hill, why there's a skating trail around in there. And it has become this kind of a family destination. When we were there in March, that it was a sunny day, tons of kids running around, probably enjoying spring break. And it just makes so much sense. The family franchise, the neighborhood franchise, has a spot for the family to be.
The last playoff game I covered up there, I don't cover the X's and O's. That's Tim and Brandon and Lily do that. I worked around Titletown during the game. There are people sledding. There are people skating. Young kids learning how to skate with the little, penguin things that are teaching them how to skate. People just want to be around the party, and they can do that during the game, even if they don't have a ticket or don't even fathom getting on the ticket list for a very long time. They can still soak in the atmosphere of the NFL on game day, and that is crucial.
And that's a central part to the draft as well. So this is a free event. There are no tickets for sale. You register through the NFL One Pass app. It's available to download in your phone's store. You can also do it online. And so it's a different clientele than the Super Bowl. It's not as corporate. It's more family, which then when you think about it, why didn't Green Bay host this earlier as the family franchise? So during the draft, Lambeau Field is going to be open. Tours are going to be available. They can actually come and sit in the bleacher seats, watch the draft on the scoreboards there within the security footprint and obviously within the stadium there. And it just speaks to what Murphy is hoping fans take away from this. This isn't a Packers thing, although it is the most a team has been included within the feel, within the design of the draft. He wants fans from all franchises to come make this pilgrimage and kind of check that box off their sports bucket list. Yeah. And I think it's going to be an experience that a lot of people are going to remember for a long time.
Right. One more little piece of trivia about the 1940 draft that was here. The Packers took a guy named Hal Van Every. Ever heard of him?
I sure have,
Why have you heard of him?
because we went to the same school.
Minnesota
Yeah,
Golden
yeah.
Gopher.
Come on, the Gophers haven't been good at football
Right.
as they were back then. That you have to. It's like required study.
Right. I'm impressed that you have heard of Hal Van Every. He played 2 years. He is not in the Ring of Honor.
No.
We don't suspect that he will be.
Yeah, it's and man, the offense back then, and everybody was involved, and yeah, it was a different game.
I know you have a lot of these planned.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to have rotating guests. It's been an honor to be on your first one. I'm going to write this word because you told me about this. Are you saving that for another episode, or can we talk about that right now? You want to save that for another episode?
The person involved in that is going to join us in a later episode.
Okay, that's fine. That's what we call a deep tease in
That is a
television,
deep tease,
boys and girls.
And I had to work to find that. Well, I remember them saying that. It was story idea number 1, if you will, on my list, which is like a CVS receipt. And we found them. And when one of the days we went up in March, the Packers called and said, "Hey, remember that thing you pitched? Yeah, you can go over and meet the people doing it." And so we did.
Okay, stop right there.
And so they're going to
'Cause
join
now,
us.
now we're just being cruel to our listeners and our viewers.
Well, no, it's a deep tease.
Yeah.
We want them to join us. I believe that's going to be the 3rd episode.
all right.
But yeah, closing thoughts. Are you under the same impression that, okay, Green Bay is finally getting this? Who knows if they get it again? But when you look at it, the totality of it, how did this not happen sooner?
Mm-hmm.
That's the main takeaway I guess I have.
Well, you've already answered that question.
Yeah.
It's the evolution of Titletown, and there being more than watching a screen with names being called. There's things to do. There are bars around there. If we have nice weather, there's great golf courses up in that area too. I mean, you may want to go for a day and then go out and do something. Spring in Wisconsin is iffy, but if it's beautiful, people are going to want to get out and about as well. They're not that far from Door County. If they want to, they can really make a 3 or 4 or 5 day trip out of it. I'm just excited to see the Jets fans be disappointed in a new setting.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of, ever since I was a kid watching it, that seems to be the running theme. You know, grown men in shoulder pads and green and Jets on their forehead, so excited. And then when Tagliabue or Roselle or Goodell, whoever makes it, and just the blood runs out of their face and the disappointment. It's really my favorite thing about spring.
And everyone imagines and questions, how could something so trivial matter so much to a person? But it has really just become part of the culture that you just expect it, as you said. So that's a good place to end here on this first episode of Green Bay on Draft. So glad that you're with us. This is, again, a limited podcast series that's going to run through the month of April. Basically, through the draft, we'll have one to kind of wrap up our closing thoughts after that. We have so much more content on the NFL draft that I want to pitch to. By the time that this is up and available to listen, Ted's story on the history of the draft will be available. Ashley Sears did a story on a number of breweries that are partnering up in Green Bay for a limited edition beer, which, again, makes a lot of sense in Wisconsin. And our next episode is going to be next week, Wednesday, April 9th, where we're going to talk to a reporter and some people involved in the last draft in Detroit, which, from all accounts, smashing success. And so we're going to look forward to that. That's Wednesday, April 9th, but we are signing off on this one. Ted, thanks so much for being here.
It's just an honor to be your first guest. This is a wonderful idea on your thing, and you've done such great work on it so far. I look forward to being a viewer and a listener on future ones.
Labor of love with some love from you with the title. It's which we'll be appreciative
I'm good
of
at
that.
naming things. That's my only skill in life.
Yeah, I'll leave that where it is. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.